The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty parking lot of Rosa's diner, a modest establishment tucked away on the edge of Highway 41. Rosa Thompson had owned this place for 17 years, through economic crashes, family struggles, and countless sleepless nights. Her small diner had become a sanctuary for people seeking honest food and genuine kindness, two things becoming increasingly rare in this complicated world. Rosa was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed violently. A man stumbled through, bleeding from his shoulder, his leather jacket torn and dirty. She recognized him immediately. His name was Marcus, a member of the Hells Angels motorcycle club, though she only knew this because he'd eaten at her diner a handful of times over the past year. He always ordered the same thing, eggs, bacon, and black coffee, and he always tipped 20%. He was quiet, respectful, and had a gentle way of speaking that contradicted the intimidating skull tattoos covering his arms. Without hesitation, Rosa rushed toward him. "Marcus, honey, sit down. Let me see that wound." Her nurse instincts kicked in from her past work in a hospital years ago. She grabbed her first aid kit from beneath the sink and carefully examined the injury. A bullet had grazed his shoulder, not too deep, but it was bleeding steadily. She cleaned it with practiced efficiency, her steady hands working quickly while Marcus winced but remained silent. "They're coming for me," Marcus whispered, his voice raspy with pain. "Rival club. They want me dead, and the cops think I started the fight. They're looking for me right now. There's a warrant out. If they find me here, I need you to." He paused, looking directly into Rosa's eyes. "I need you to let me go. I'll leave through the back. You never saw me. Tell them nothing." Rosa understood the gravity of the situation. She knew that harboring a wanted person could bring serious legal consequences. She knew that helping a Hell's Angel would mark her in ways she couldn't predict. But she also knew that Marcus was wounded and desperate, and that turning away a human being in need violated everything she believed in. The choice wasn't difficult, even though it should have been. "Stay in the storage room," Rosa said firmly. "There's a cot back there. Sit tight." She finished bandaging his shoulder and helped him to his feet. As she led him toward the back of the diner, she heard it, the distinct wail of police sirens drawing closer. Rosa's heart raced as she settled Marcus into the back room, covering him with blankets and ensuring he had water. She checked her appearance in the mirror, smoothing her uniform and taking several deep breaths to calm herself. The sirens grew louder, and within minutes, police cars screeched into her parking lot, kicking up clouds of dust and gravel. Two officers entered the diner, badges gleaming, eyes hard and searching. Rosa was already behind the counter, her expression calm and welcoming, though her pulse thundered in her ears. She'd made her decision, and now she had to live with it. "Morning, officers," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Coffee? We've got fresh pie today." The officers glanced around the empty diner, their suspicion evident. They questioned her about whether she'd seen a man matching Marcus's description. Rosa maintained her composure, answering truthfully that she hadn't seen anyone unusual. She offered them coffee and pie, treating them like regular customers, her demeanor so natural and unassuming that they eventually left without searching the back. After the sirens faded into the distance, Rosa allowed herself to exhale. She'd just committed a federal crime, all because something inside her refused to turn away from suffering. She didn't know then that this single act of compassion would change everything. 3 hours after the police left, Marcus emerged from the storage room, his shoulder already looking better with proper bandaging. Rosa had brought him food and water throughout the afternoon, speaking to him only when necessary, keeping conversation minimal in case anyone returned. As he sat at the counter eating silently, Rosa realized she didn't actually know much about him beyond his name and his order. "Why did they come after you?" she asked, unable to stop her curiosity any longer. Marcus set down his fork and looked at her with an expression that mingled gratitude and sorrow. He explained that the rival club had initiated the violence first, attacking one of his brothers outside a bar. When Marcus tried to help his friend, things escalated. He wasn't the aggressor, but the police didn't care about details or context. They saw a Hell's Angel and immediately decided he was guilty. "My club will help me," Marcus said quietly. "But I needed time to get away, to disappear for a while. When I saw your diner, something told me to try my luck. You treated me like a human being when you could have treated me like a criminal. I won't forget that, Rosa. My whole club won't forget that." Rosa waved her hand dismissively. "I did what was right. That's all that matters." But even as she spoke those words, she felt uncertainty creeping in. She'd been so focused on doing the right thing in that moment that she hadn't fully considered the consequences. Around 6 o'clock that evening, Marcus finally left through the back door. He moved quickly, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Rosa locked up the diner and drove home, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. She told herself that was the end of it, a strange chapter that would now close. She would never see Marcus again, and life would return to normal. The next morning, she arrived at her diner at 5:30, as she always did, to begin preparations for breakfast service. She unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet restaurant, breathing in the familiar scent of the place she loved. She started the coffee makers and began setting up the grills, her routine as comfortable as breathing. Around 7:30, as she was flipping through her morning newspaper, she heard something that made her freeze. It started as a low rumble in the distance, barely perceptible at first. Then it grew louder and louder, a sound like distant thunder that would not diminish. The rumble became a roar, the sound of multiple engines working in unison. Rosa walked to the front window and looked out into the parking lot. Her breath caught in her throat. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. They filled the parking lot, spilled onto the road, lined up in perfect formation. Leather jackets covered in patches and insignia stretched as far as she could see. Rosa's hands trembled as she counted, 100, 200, 300 bikes, their engines creating a symphony of mechanical thunder that seemed to shake the very foundation of her diner. She stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. Had Marcus brought them here? Were they angry? Would they tear the diner apart? Everything she'd worked for was suddenly vulnerable, and she realized that her single act of kindness might have just destroyed her life. Rosa's mind raced through 1,000 scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. She thought about calling the police, but something held her back. These weren't mindless criminals, they were people, organized and clearly purposeful. There was a precision to how they'd arrived, a choreography to how they positioned themselves. This wasn't a rampage, it was a statement. The engine noise gradually decreased as the riders cut their ignitions. 300 Hell's Angels sat silently on their motorcycles, waiting. Rosa realized she couldn't hide in her diner like a frightened animal. She had to face whatever this was. With trembling hands, she unlocked the front door and stepped outside into the morning air. A figure emerged from the sea of leather and chrome, a massive man with a graying beard, his jacket covered in patches and insignias, his demeanor radiating authority. He approached Rosa slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel. She held her ground, forcing herself to stand tall despite the fear coursing through every fiber of her being. "Rosa Thompson?" the man asked, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone so imposing. "Yes," she answered, her voice wavering only slightly. "I'm Rosa Thompson. My name is Jack. I'm the president of the Hells Angels chapter that Marcus belongs to." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Rosa shook it. His grip was firm but not aggressive. "Marcus told us what you did. How you protected him when you didn't have to. How you risked everything for a complete stranger." Rosa's mouth went dry. She wanted to explain, to justify her actions, but Jack continued speaking. "In our world, loyalty and honor mean everything. We have a code that most people don't understand. You lived that code yesterday, Rosa. You showed more honor in one moment than most people show in their entire lives." Jack gestured toward the hundreds of bikers behind him. "These men and women came here today because they needed to see the person who helped one of our own. They needed to understand what it looks like when someone chooses compassion over fear." Rosa felt tears forming in her eyes. This wasn't a threat, it was an acknowledgement. The 300 bikers weren't here to harm her, they were here to honor her. Jack continued, "We want you to know that you have friends now, Rosa. Real friends. You are part of our family. The Hells Angels organization is going to make sure that anyone who tries to hurt you, anyone who tries to exploit you or your business, will answer to all of us. From this moment forward, you are protected." Rosa couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They streamed down her cheeks as she processed what was happening. This woman, who'd worked so hard to build something good and decent in a world that often rewarded cynicism and cruelty, had just been embraced by an organization she'd only known through media stereotypes and fear-mongering news stories. Jack placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We're not asking anything from you, Rosa. We're just saying thank you the only way we know how, by showing up, by being present, by making sure the world knows that you are good people and that you matter." He removed his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It was a Hells Angels jacket, with all the patches and insignias that marked her as being under their protection. As the morning light grew stronger, Rosa stood in her diner's parking lot surrounded by 300 bikers, wearing a Hells Angels jacket, and she realized that sometimes the most powerful moments in life come from making the right choice even when the outcome is completely uncertain. The bikers stayed for several hours that morning, but not in the way Rosa had initially feared. They came inside her diner in waves, filling her tables and booths, ordering breakfast with enthusiasm and genuine kindness. They told stories, laughed together, and treated Rosa and her small staff with respect and dignity. She discovered they were teachers, mechanics, accountants, nurses, and artists, people with families and responsibilities, living lives that society had unfairly stereotyped and condemned. By the end of the day, Rosa had served the most customers she'd ever served in a single period. News outlets arrived, cameras flashing, reporters asking questions. The story spread like wildfire. Local news picked it up, then regional channels, and within 48 hours, national media had latched onto the narrative. A black woman diner owner protects a Hell's Angel from police, and 300 bikers show up to thank her. It was the kind of story that people desperately wanted to believe in, a story about humanity, compassion, and loyalty transcending boundaries. But the attention brought complications. The police came back with harder questions. Federal agents appeared, wanting information about Marcus and his whereabouts. Rosa discovered that her act of protection had legal implications she hadn't fully considered. She could be charged with obstruction of justice, harboring a fugitive, and potentially other crimes. A lawyer from the biker community contacted her immediately, offering free representation. The Hells Angels, true to their word, were not abandoning her. The court proceedings were intense. The prosecutor painted Rosa as someone who deliberately harbored a criminal, showing bias because of her own race and social position. The defense argued that Rosa was a compassionate human being who'd made a split-second decision to help someone in need. The case became about more than just Marcus, it became about what it means to choose humanity over law, to choose compassion over procedure. In the end, the judge recognized that Rosa had no prior criminal history, had acted spontaneously without premeditation, and had harbored Marcus for only a few hours. The sentence was probation and community service. It was a light sentence, suggesting that even the judge understood the moral complexity of the situation. Some in the community celebrated it as justice, others saw it as proof that the system was broken. Through it all, the Hells Angels remained constant. They came to her diner regularly, protected her when protesters showed up on both sides of the issue, and helped her navigate the sudden notoriety that had invaded her private life. Rosa discovered that strength wasn't always about physical power. Sometimes it was about having people in your corner who believed in you unconditionally. Business changed dramatically. Some customers stayed away, afraid of the biker presence. But many more came specifically because of the story. Her diner became something of a pilgrimage site for people interested in this strange tale of unlikely friendship and community. Rosa hired more staff to handle the increased volume, expanded her menu, and eventually opened a second location. More importantly, though, she found genuine friendships among the bikers who frequented her establishment. Jack, the chapter president, became a regular presence. He showed her pictures of his grandchildren, asked about her life, and treated her with the kind of respect usually reserved for immediate family members. Other bikers shared their stories, and Rosa began to understand that these people were far more complex and human than any media portrayal had ever suggested. 6 months after the initial police incident, Marcus walked into the diner. He was fully healed, his shoulder recovered without complication. He sat at the counter at his usual spot, and Rosa brought him his regular order without asking. They didn't say much, but they didn't need to. The understanding between them was complete. A full year had passed since the day 300 motorcycles filled Rosa's parking lot. The legal troubles had ended, the media attention had faded, and life had settled into a new normal that somehow felt both extraordinary and ordinary at the same time. Rosa had transformed from a struggling diner owner into a respected member of a community she'd never expected to join. One Friday evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Rosa closed her original diner for a special event. Every inch of the restaurant was decorated, and long tables had been set up to accommodate the unexpected guest list. The Hells Angels chapter, combined with representatives from several other chapters from surrounding states, had organized a formal dinner in her honor. They were calling it a celebration of unity, compassion, and the power of doing the right thing. Jack presented Rosa with a custom leather jacket, her name embroidered on the back along with a special insignia representing her status as a friend and protector of the organization. As she slipped on the jacket, something shifted inside her. She'd spent her whole life working hard, playing by the rules, believing that virtue would be its own reward. But rewards had been sparse and recognition even scarcer. Now, at 58 years old, she was being celebrated for a single moment of spontaneous kindness, surrounded by people who had chosen to stand by her. Rosa gave a short speech, her voice steady and clear. She spoke about how fear had nearly prevented her from helping Marcus that day. She acknowledged that she'd broken the law, that she wasn't claiming to be a hero or a saint. But she explained that the law and morality aren't always the same thing, that sometimes doing the right thing requires breaking rules made by people who don't understand real human need. She talked about how her assumptions about the Hells Angels had been completely wrong, how she'd learned that people are more complex than their stereotypes, that the media's portrayal of any group tells you more about the biases of the storytellers than about the actual people being portrayed. She spoke about what she'd learned from Jack, Marcus, and all the other bikers, lessons about loyalty, honor, and what it truly means to take care of your community. As she finished speaking, the entire room stood and applauded. There were tears on many faces, including Rosa's own. She realized that her single moment of courage had created ripples that extended far beyond what she could have imagined. It had challenged preconceptions, broken down barriers, and created connections between people who would never have met otherwise. In the months following the celebration, Rosa's life continued to evolve. She became an advocate for criminal justice reform, speaking at conferences and community events about the gap between law and morality. She mentored young people from the neighborhood, many of them from underprivileged backgrounds, teaching them that doing the right thing sometimes requires courage and that unexpected friendships can change everything. The Hells Angels became permanent fixtures in her life, but not in an intrusive way. They were simply there, part of her extended family, people she could call on and who could call on her. They helped her renovate and expand her diner. They supported her charitable efforts. They became part of her story just as she'd become part of theirs. One evening, 2 years after that fateful day, Rosa sat alone in her diner after closing time. She was drinking a cup of coffee, reflecting on everything that had changed. A woman she didn't recognize knocked on the front window. Rosa recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same desperation she'd seen in Marcus that morning. Without hesitation, she unlocked the door. "Come in," Rosa said gently. "Whatever you need, we'll figure it out." As she helped the stranger inside, she realized that her journey was far from over. The act of compassion had become who she was, not just something she did once. She'd learned that being human means seeing people in their complexity, refusing to reduce them to their worst moments, and always leaving room for the possibility of redemption and connection. The Hells Angels, watching from across the street as they did every night, smiled and nodded to each other. They knew what Rosa was doing. They recognized a kindred spirit, someone who understood that true strength lies in protecting the vulnerable, in standing up for the marginalized, and in never forgetting where you came from or why compassion matters. Rosa had become a legend in her own right, not because of a single moment of courage, but because she'd chosen to live every day with integrity, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right, regardless of the cost. And in a world that often felt cold and uncaring, that kind of person was rarer and more valuable than all the gold in the world.